You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, the 7th of February. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, I can't get the laugh out of my voice because before we press record today, we're having the biggest fight about the Grammys, about the women at the Grammys. So much so that I think we traumatised the whole office.
Then don't misrepresent me.
Okay, we're not even going to say what it's about.
Exactly.
But Mia was so wrong. I've drawn an artwork that I should honestly auction off to the Outlouders during that fight because I tuned out because of how wrong Mia was. I knew Holly had it.
You were both coming at me and then you just abandoned us both to record it, post it on Instagram, and then just scroll on your phone.
Anyway, you'll be happy to hear Outlouders that we're not going to have that fight.
No, but I think the tension will permeate.
Yeah.
And that's what the Outlouders
and
love.
You may sense there is one adjacent topic.
I find it very exciting.
I want you all to guess which adjacent topic it is. So, on the show today, what the King's illness means for the endless soap opera that is the royal family. Latest instalment, Harry's flyby visit. Also, beaches, G-strings, and a man who doesn't know where to look. Plus, we've started asking famous men if and when they want babies. And Andy Lee gave us an answer we hadn't heard before. But first, Jessie.
In case you missed it, Jacob Elordi, the Australian actor who you might recognise from Saltburn, and I met him for the first time in Euphoria, allegedly assaulted a guy at the Clovelly Hotel in Sydney. So 26-year-old Elordi, he was born in Brisbane. Some people don't realise this because he does such a good American accent. He's in everything at the moment. He was at this pub and he was approached by a guy named Joshua Fox, who is a Kiss FM radio producer. Audio from the incident was played on radio on Monday, and you can hear when Fox approaches Elordi with an empty jar. At first, Elordi is very polite, and then Fox requests that Elordi fill it with bathwater, which is a reference to Saltburn, where a character drinks some bathwater that has been infused with a certain bodily fluid. He said, I want you to fill it so that I can send it to the studio with Jackie O. The thing Elordi seemed to be most annoyed about was that Fox was filming it without his consent, and you can hear Elordi say, "Can you not, man, please?" On radio, Fox said that things escalated when he stopped filming. Elordi demanded that he delete the footage, and then Fox refused and said he absolutely wouldn't. And then according to him, things got physical. Charges have not yet been laid, but things could get messy. Because if there are charges laid against Jacob Elordi and he's got this enormous career in the US, then good luck getting a visa.
Yeah.
Whatever happened, we would never condone violence. But I do look at this story and go, get your phone out of Jacob Elordi's face. He's trying to have a drink at the Clovelly Hotel. Leave him alone.
It's a whole other thing because this producer was trying to make content, right?
Yes.
And of course he was filming it because, these pranks are filmed. And I had not thought about, yes, Jacob Elordi was in a public space, but if someone films you against your will, that's not illegal if you are in a public space. But I can completely understand why Jacob Elordi would have wanted that guy to delete the footage because it's like Jacob Elordi was the butt of that joke.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of video that would go viral. And, he didn't choose to be part of it, this viral moment, and yet it could have gone viral. So we're living in a very different world now. When you're a celebrity, you know that you could be filmed in public, but this is a whole other level, someone actually making you a part of their content against your will.
And paps are one thing, and in a way they're less sinister because you can spot them. Like they've got the long lens cameras and they're kind of he would be used to seeing them, but now you'd be thinking everyone who comes up to you, everyone with their phone out, it's become so commonplace to just film, if you see a celebrity out and about, you see people just get their phones out as if they...
But it's anyone really, isn't it? Because someone could see you across a cafe or wherever. You could be doing something. You could fall over. Someone could have filmed that and then suddenly that's a viral moment. Now, you've got no right to take their phone and remove the video, but...
I understand the desire.
My takeaway from this, Jacob Elordi was at the Clovelly Hotel. I've been to the Clovelly Hotel. That's it.
We've received breaking news from Buckingham Palace.
King Charles has cancer. This news has been so big, so all-consuming, that it's very unlikely you're hearing it here first. Let's be honest. So why is it the biggest news story in the world? Even bigger than the Grammys, perhaps, that we were just talking about? Well, because King Charles has only just got the job that he was literally born to do, right? It's 9 months-ish since he was coronated in, a show literally seen around the world to become the king. And it's only 9 months since then. And now the Buckingham Palace on Monday released a statement saying that during his recent treatment for an enlarged prostate, another issue was discovered and that it's cancer. They've specified that it's not prostate cancer, and they've said that he's getting treatment for it and that he's going to be stepping back for a while. This has consumed everybody because everybody's like, who's in charge now? What does this mean? How serious is it? And some of the signs are that it might be quite serious because Prince Harry flew in from LA immediately. And although there's lots of headlines, and we're obviously going to discuss this, that's saying, isn't this lovely? Is there a bit of reconciliation happening? It's also maybe a sign that things are quite serious if your son gets on a plane straight away.
Cancer is always pretty serious. I mean, any cancer diagnosis, and of course there are degrees of severity and stages, but the idea of getting on a plane is an interesting one. And what it means.
Of course, you're right, Mia, that all cancer diagnoses are serious, but many out louders listening know people in their lives, and maybe they themselves have had cancer and have had treatment, and there are varying degrees of severity and obviously varying degrees of severity of the treatment. So there's a lot of speculation about what this could be. Many, many people are talking about that. We've been asked not to speculate. Obviously, we're not going to speculate. The question is, what's obsessed us all about this news?
Well, I think what's interesting is that straight away there was, of course, an outpouring of sympathy because it was noted that he's waited 70 years to get on the throne and he's only been there for 16 or 18 months. That's been the first reaction, is sort of a human one. What bad luck, what terrible timing, if there could ever be anything other than terrible timing for a cancer diagnosis. But given the context of, it was only a couple of weeks ago that it was announced that Kate was going to hospital for abdominal surgery, we don't know what that was, and that William would also be taking off the foreseeable future, all his engagements were also cancelled along with hers until I think Easter because he wanted to help her recuperate at home. And so Charles's enlarged prostate was very much seen as this is just pretty standard, nothing to worry about, it's non-cancerous. So that was a big shock, and then everyone was reacting to that trajectory. This is a whole other trajectory, and because William was essentially on annual leave, as was Kate, who was on sick leave, they are the three biggest hitters in the royal family, I suppose, along with Camilla. But when you look at the three stars and the three most senior members, it's them and Camilla. Certainly the most popular members would be those three. So now that Charles is out of action, William suddenly had to come back in, and they've scheduled 2 engagements randomly for him this week. Hull, you're more across obviously what it means, but Jessie, do you feel like it's very much about damage control, business as usual?
In light of some choices that King Charles has made in terms of winding back the royal family to more sort of a skeleton staff, they're looking at it now going, oh, wow, now we've got essentially 3 out of action.
A couple of them self-selected out as well.
So here's the thing. The official line is, right, that if the king is sick or out of the country or doing something else, the people who are in charge are called the councillors of state, right? And the certain number of royals are councillors of state. They're the top tier. And officially, Harry and Andrew are part of that, right? So the official councillors of state are William, Harry, Andrew, and Beatrice. Now, last year, because Harry and Andrew have kind of been unofficially taken out of that, they added 2 new ones. And the 2 new councillors of state were Anne and Edward, so they weren't before. It's interesting because when I've been reading about this, it keeps saying the Queen, and I keep thinking, oh, the Queen's dead. But of course, the Queen is Camilla, and it just takes a minute to get your head around that.
So she doesn't step up?
Yes, she does. So it's the Queen, the Prince of Wales, Anne, Edward, and Beatrice, right, are the people who are officially in charge. Now, if the things hadn't happened with Harry, then Harry and Meghan, obviously as his partner, would be on that list, and they would be stepping in and doing a lot of this work. Given what's happened, They're not. And I wonder, so there's a
When you
lot.
say in charge of actually what?
So this is interesting too, right?
Australia?
What do royals do? Because I was saying, when we were talking about this, I was saying, there's no one to do all the things. Imagine that we discover that they don't actually need doing, which is a whole other
Yeah.
issue about the role of the monarchy. And I'm not a massive monarchist, even though I'm fascinated by them.
Holly,
So-
those ribbons won't cut themselves.
Exactly. It's true. But the thing is that actually they do a lot. So Princess Anne is famously the most hardworking royal. And last year, in a 365-day period, she did 457 jobs. Now,
Wow.
they would vary from turns up to tour the new HQ of a charity that she's an ambassador for, giving a speech at a lunch that is maybe a division of the army that she is the head of their annual awards ceremony. Like there'd be things like that, or cutting a ribbon at an important new facility.
So when you say jobs, these feel like they've been invented to justify the royal family.
Well, like a keynote is a job. A lot of people do that.
But it's not that you're I understand they bring a lot of attention to charities and all of those things. But everything they do is purely ceremonial. So it's purely window dressing. It doesn't affect anything functionally. They don't drive a train. They don't approve legislation.
I think they run
They-
charities.
They don't run them, Jessie.
I
They're
think
like
they do
a
real work,
patron.
though, like-
No, they're like an ambassador for a charity, right? So it's nice to have, but does the charity still run without the princess
fair,
or the
fair.
king? Of course it does.
Well, this is the whole interesting argument, right? Is that, and this was sort of explored a bit in Harry's book. He said, in his words, that every year when that list comes out about who's done the most job, there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of tension. And that sometimes some of the more minor royals are going, well, I would have done that many jobs if I'd have been asked to, but I wasn't asked to, was I? Like there's a lot of tension about, because they all want to be seen to be working really hard and being really useful, because they know how much criticism there is about them getting a cut of the public
But
purse.
don't they want to do just the flashy jobs? Like, does anyone really want to go to like Dorset and visit
Well,
a
it depends. I mean,
tap factory?
This is why everybody loves Princess Anne, right? She turns up to everything, she works her ass off, and she never complains and she never explains. So it is an interesting point, Mia, that if you were going to revolutionize the monarchy, as Charles has not revolutionized but modernized, evolved, William is probably the monarch who's going to make the most change, because he will be the king for a long time when he's king. Charles is always going to be a transitional king because he's elderly at coming to power. You might decide that how many of these things that we do actually need doing. Now, charities would tell you, and whenever I criticize the royal family, which I do relatively often, I will get messages from people saying, you don't understand how important they have been in raising the profile of this charity, or how if Princess Anne is going to come to this lunch, suddenly the donors will come to the lunch, suddenly they'll give money, suddenly the local press will cover it, and those kind of things. So,
I mean, there's what they do for tourism, but it's also hard to quantify what they do for the morale of all the organisations or the people that see them, as kind of like mascots of Britain. But let's just remember, this is all in exchange for a massive, massive amount of taxpayer money.
Princess Anne, for her 457 jobs, which I would never suggest is not an enormous amount of jobs, gets paid approximately $3 million a year, plus, of course, all the residences, all the land, all the assets that she has.
Do you get paid per job? Because
No.
it's just a fixed salary and you can do 400 jobs or you can do 40 jobs.
Yes, but the thing is that obviously and this is what Harry was alluding to in his book, is that when the stats come in and it's decided who falls off the public purse. So the reason, for example, and I know we're getting a bit weedy, that Princess Beatrice is on the list of councillors of state, but Princess Eugenie is not, is she is not officially a working royal, which means that she doesn't officially get any dollar
Whose
bills
choice
anymore.
was that?
I think it was Prince Charles's choice to slim down, as Jessie said, to slim down to some extent. Anyway, all this to say that the number of people who are available to do these jobs now is a lot smaller. And there is a possibility that Harry getting on the plane to come and see Charles is not so much about, a reconciliation,
wishes.
emotional moment. Maybe he's been asked to come back in.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think so, because I think what you need to look at, Harry gets on a plane to meet with Prince Charles is the headlines, right? But what's emerged today
I hope they're making
is
up.
that they spent 45 minutes together at Clarence House before Charles got on a helicopter and went to his country estate in Sandringham without Harry. So to me, the cynic's view would be Harry jumped on a plane because it's a bad look. There's been, ever since the news broke about Kate and about Prince Charles, even before he was diagnosed with cancer, there's been a bit of, I wonder if you've reached out. I wonder if you've, and it was reported by the palace officially that Prince Charles personally called his two sons because they know that that's what everyone wants to know about. So Harry getting on a plane is very good optics is the cynic's view.
That is
for Brand
so
Sussex.
cynical.
No, I'm not saying it's my view. I'm saying that's the cynic's view for Brand Sussex. It looks very good. And clearly Charles
You know what would look better
bailed
though is
pretty
if he hung
quickly.
around. Like what would look better is, and I'm not necessarily criticising him because we have no idea what went on, which is why I'm saying maybe it was a business meeting, which is like,
hung
hey,
around
Harry,
to help out.
William really needs your help. He didn't see William. It seems like that is a rift that is too far. That would be a better look, is not necessarily just flying in
to
for
step
half
up
an hour.
for the family.
Do you reckon it's a possibility, Jessie, that they're asking Harry if he'll pick up a bit of the slack? And would you do that for your dad and your brother?
These moments within any families are very clarifying. And the thing that I'm interested in isn't so much the speculation about his health. I understand that's private. But I'm really interested in the repairing of that relationship.
Whose job is that,
Do you
do you
think
think?
it's possible?
The repairing.
I think it's both of them. I think it's definitely both of them. I
Do
totally
you?
understood him getting on the plane and going there and sitting with his dad.
Why is
and-
it William's job when Harry's betrayed
Harry said in
their
his
confidences, have accused his wife of being
Well,
racist?
we've talked about this before and we can go back and back and back. And this is the same with any story. It all depends on how far you go back. But you can point to parts where Harry was betrayed by William and Harry was betrayed by Charles. So I don't think that it's gone one way. It's obviously turned into a
I
mess.
disagree.
I'd
I think you can have behind the scenes betrayals. What Harry has done in particular is scorched earth with that book, with other things.
But what
that
can you
interviews.
forgive and put under the bridge in these extreme circumstances, like Jessie's saying, right? Because what is it not in dispute, because Harry put it in his book, that Charles hates the feud between William and
Oh,
Harry, and that he said to them on that day when Harry flew in for his grandfather's funeral, please, boys, don't make my final years a misery. He wants them to heal this rift. Do you think that they need to try and put this aside? And I know we can't talk about, we don't know them, but, generally, as you're saying about families, do you kind of owe it to your parents in their last years to try and rise above some shit that's really hurt you?
Yes. That's the thing. It's like, I think you realize how finite time is and you can quarrel with siblings and parents, but when someone dies, you go, oh, we don't have all the time in the world to sort this out. Like we have a really short amount of time. And if we don't sort this out, then I never have a brother again. And I don't think we think like that, especially at the ages that Harry and William are. So if they're ever going to sort it out, surely it's now.
Mamamia out loud!
No, leave the G-strings, they're brilliant.
As long as you're covering up all the important bits.
Women should be allowed to wear anything they want at the beach.
If you're offended by skin, don't come to a beach.
A letter written by a Gold Coast man that was published in the Gold Coast Bulletin a couple of weeks ago has gone viral along with the person who wrote it. His name is Ian Grace. He is a Gold Coast community worker and he's been running a local charity for the past 14 years. I'd say he'd be in his 70s. The charity he runs is the Youth Music Venture, which he's the founder and president of, that works with teenagers. He was a finalist in the 2023 Gold Coast Australian of the Year Local Hero category and the Gold Coast Volunteer of the Year in 2022. And I think that context is important before I read you the letter in terms of knowing a little bit about this person. In part, his letter said, at an event run by our local councillor where our musicians were playing, and he's talking about the musicians from the charity he runs, one young lady in particular was walking on the footpath on the main road and had the tiniest triangle in front and was as close to naked as anyone could be. You could see she was looking almost defiantly at people as they approached, almost daring them to say something. There's something very wrong here. While any man would enjoy the view, I believe women are very much demeaning and cheapening themselves, portraying themselves as sex objects, then decrying it when men see them that way. Bare bums can be seen to be every bit as erotic, if not more so, than women's bare breasts, so would it not make sense that they are banned identically? If not banned at the beach, very definitely banned the moment they are off the beach. This certainly should not be allowed in public pools or theme and water parks, which are very much more family-oriented. Young kids don't need to see women's bums. Now, of course, he's talking about the trend over the last few years of women, certainly younger women, wearing, I think they were called Brazilian bikini bottoms. They're basically like G-strings, like quite close to G-strings. And there's one more bit that I wanted to read at the end of the letter, which I thought was interesting. He said, innocently, I admired a shapely bare bum on the beach and was taken aback and felt uncomfortable when that same young lady was later serving me coffee. I almost felt like I had inadvertently violated her privacy. Jessie, do you like to wear a G-string at the beach?
I don't personally wear a G-string at the beach because I don't feel that I have the bum for it. However, I am so all for women wearing whatever the hell they want to the beach. I looked at this and I don't want people to go after this man. I don't think he's a bad man. And unfortunately, if you spoke to most men of this age about what they thought, they would probably agree. I think that's more to do with upbringing and how things have changed and all of that.
I don't think it's just men either that would probably
Maybe
agree
not,
with
maybe
that.
not, because this isn't what people were wearing when they were in their teens or whatever. So it's new and newness can be confronting. But it isn't hurting anyone. And what we can't seem to recognise is that these standards are constantly changing. In the 1950s, when bikinis became really popularised, the Pope came out and called them sinful.
Mm-hmm.
There is a really famous image of a woman at the beach. This was probably before the 1950s, but she's standing there and there is a male police officer with a tape measure measuring from the bottom of her swimmers to her knee because there's a law about that. The reason this riles us so much is that since the beginning of time, men have walked around waving a finger about women and their bodies. What they wear, what they don't wear, what they do with their bodies, how they change their bodies, blah, blah, blah. And it simply does not happen the other way around.
Of course it doesn't.
One of the most iconic images in Australian politics is Tony Abbott with budgie smugglers on. He could be the Prime Minister of our country and I can see the shape of his ballsack. I can see it very clearly. And the shape of his penis.
I should say, in interviews, it does a little bit. He undermines himself because in the letter he also talks about his problem with tight bicycle shorts and activewear. But he does also say, or did in subsequent TV interviews, that he believes the same policy should be applied for budgie smugglers.
Yes.
Look, it's not going to happen on the beach, but just off the beach. And I've been asked this question many times now as well, what about budgie smugglers? And same thing. If guys walk off the beach, if girls walk off the beach, cover up your swimwear.
Like a woman would at the beach isn't going around looking at men's bodies or making up rules or whatever. Like the beach is for everyone, whether or not.
So then should people be able to be nude or topless or
women
on all the
are
beaches?
topless sometimes on the beach, and I look around at them and I go, all power to you, because men are walking around topless all the time. Like these are socialized.
Oh, come on, you can't. I'm sorry.
And what we see as sexual, it is not a woman's fault.
Jessie, you can't compare a man's bare chest to a woman's bare chest. Because one is sexual and one is not. And
no, it's not.
And don't pretend that that's not the case.
In fact, one feeds babies and one doesn't is the only difference.
I'm not saying that's all it's used for, but to say that culturally women's breasts are not sexual.
So that's like saying that culturally women's ankles are sexual. You could do that with any part of a woman's body.
Well, maybe one day they won't be sexual, women's breasts, but at the moment I wouldn't compare them to men's bare
I think
chests.
they should be though. But when I go to the beach, I would have no issue with a woman laying there without a top on. Obviously, there are like a woman walking down the street without a top on. I don't know what the rules are there. But walking around with your bum out, I do not know how this could rile you up so much. Like you might look at it, you might be confronted for a moment. You might go, oh, that wasn't on the beach 10 years ago. And then just like bikinis, it took bikinis 10 to 15 years to become normal, where everyone then went, oh, okay, this is what people wore.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's an underboob trend, there's a whatever.
So
all
you
power
think this
to
is
you.
just a transitional time?
Yeah. The thing is that's interesting about this to me is I question the relevance of this conversation in general, right? Who cares what this guy thinks about what people wear on the beach? Like it doesn't matter because he's not making rules about it. He's not going to ban it. It's not going to happen.
He just wrote a letter to the editor.
He just wrote a letter,
really.
right? This is just his opinion. And the thing is just because things make you uncomfortable, it doesn't mean they're wrong. You know, like when I examine how I feel about this personally, I don't even wear a bikini, but that's for not any things of modesty. It's to do with the skin I've got, the body shape. Like I just don't show a lot of flesh, but I love being at the beach and I swim all the time. My daughter lives in a bikini and she says to me all the time how much she hates feeling ogled at by particularly older men. And I totally remember that and relate to it. What we need to remember, as Jessie is very excellently pointing out, that happens whether you're wearing a G-string or not. So I can try and police the width of the fabric on my daughter's bikini bottoms.
Again, sorry, it can happen,
does, right?
But
she gets ogled. She doesn't wear a G-string and she gets ogled.
I understand.
And I think
it's ogled.
Ogled.
Out loud, is this one of our words? Is this new going into the vernacular? You both said ogled. I think Jessie said oogled.
I have no idea
I think
how you
it's
say
ogled.
Ogled. I would say
don't know.
ogled, but she's not wearing a G-string. She still gets ogled. I have my own feelings about how big her bikini bottom should be, right? When we're out buying a bikini, I'll often say, turn it round, right?
I want to see the back
and
of
I
it.
make a decision. It's my money. I'm buying it. But
what do you base that decision on?
But the thing is that just because I feel that way, it's not really important. My discomfort is not what matters in this situation. What does matter in this situation is that my daughter is safe to walk down the street in whatever the hell she wants to wear. And maybe I have to deal with my own prejudices about how much fabric the bikini bottom should be. Because let's be honest, whether there's an inch of fabric on either side of the bum crack or not is not the thing that's going to decide whether or not she gets ogled. And just like we're talking about women going topless on the beach, I can be at a pub and see young people going into a club wearing tiny little tops that barely cover them. Like they're allowed to do that, and I'm allowed to feel a bit uncomfortable about it. Deal with it, Holly. Women can wear what they want.
I'm going to defend my friend in Grace because I think it's very interesting what you both said when you spoke about why you don't wear these kinds of bikinis or in fact even bikinis. And I think that gives us a bit of an interesting entry point into this. And I will acknowledge that as the mother of a teenage girl and teenage boy, I have struggled with this. Every woman who's got a tween or a teenage girl is having this conversation in her house, and every man as well, because swimsuit bottoms have changed, like they really have. And this is something that's happened in the last couple of years. And it's been interesting because—
It'll probably change again though, Mia, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that there have been a lot of Gen X mothers and Gen X women in general who've been like, wow, where did that body confidence come from? Because it's not just on the beach that these girls are wearing it. It's also walking down the street. It's also in parks. It's very comfortably, beach adjacent, not just actually when they're lying there.
You know where it came from? It came from us telling them. Like, we can't be the generation of feminists who said, love your body, embrace it no matter what it looks like, and then say, oh my God, you're being a bit too confident with that body. Please cover it up.
Absolutely. So there's always a part of me that's like, this is awesome. Like, this is awesome. Because it's not just the beauty standard when we were younger was like almost not having a bottom. Now it's about having a big bottom, the bigger your bottom is. And, some young women are getting implants to make their bottoms look bigger. So the whole idea of, does my bum look bigger in this? The answer to that now, the answer that you want now is different to the answer that perhaps Gen X women wanted. But I think that what we're wrestling with as feminists and also as men of Ian's age is things are changing. Things are changing for the better. So men are being told, stop objectifying women, stop treating them as sex objects. You can't grab a woman's bum. Like I've said this many times, when I was a waiter, people grabbed my bum and that was a thing that you could do. Now we understand, and Ian understands, that we can't do that anymore. We talk about respect for women, not sexualizing women, not doing all of those things, not catcalling. So I can understand the confusion of some people when they're like, but what am I meant to do? So he's like, at a time women are wearing less and less and becoming more comfortable, having their bottoms out, I'm also being told, don't look, women aren't just sexual beings, equality, etc. And I think it's interesting to look at why girls are wearing them. And I think it comes back to whether it's these bikinis or it's your daughter's wearing really short shorts. There's a time in the life of every woman of a teenage girl, I think, or young girl, who will slut shame their daughter. They won't mean to, but they will. It'll be, you're not going out in that skirt, or you can't buy that bikini bottom. And I think it's interesting to think about, because I know there's a lot of different things going on here. Young women and young girls, like in a perfect world, of course, women should be able to wear what they want. But I don't think it's realistic to wear a certain thing and then expect nobody to look at you. And I feel like the reason that they are wearing it is because they want to be looked at, but only by the people they want to look at them and admire them. I'm not saying anything's right or wrong, and I'm certainly not arguing for bans, but I'm just saying what Ian has expressed I think is really valid, which is I don't know what I'm meant to do.
Well, what he's meant to do is question his reaction. Not why is that young woman wearing that, but why do I feel the way I feel, right? These are complicated things about the way I feel about how big my daughter's bikini bottom is. I have to question myself. You know, you can't just go, this is how it is, because I remember feeling that way so strongly, being out once in Sydney when I was in my early 20s, so not a teenager anymore, wearing a short skirt and just hating that this particular guy was looking at me. I think that the argument about if you don't want to be looked at, don't show flesh is nonsense, because women are smart enough to know the difference between a creepy guy ogling them. My daughter already knows that difference, and somebody who maybe looks and then like sort of corrects themselves and look away.
But hang on, isn't the point of wearing them, so when you ask girls why they wear them, they're not going to say to attract men or to attract other women, whatever. It'll be because I like how my bottom looks, and you two both said, I don't wear that. You said, Jessie, I don't. All right.
But you know why? I think it's a generational thing as well. I'm a millennial. Millennials didn't wear it. So I think that we're programmed by our generation, and then what we see as normal has also become invisible. What I love about bottoms on the beach is that they are invisible to me now. A few years ago, I was walking around going, oh, look at all the bottoms. But now they're invisible.
The more bottoms, the better.
Are they wearing them because they're comfortable? If you're wearing it because you like the way your bottom looks, you can't, but you can't see it, right? Because it's behind you. So it's about
oh my God.
how it looks to others. No, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm not saying it's anything wrong with this. I'm saying that
Mia, it's fashion.
But I understand.
G-strings will be out of fashion again in 3 years' time.
Again, guys, I'm not saying let's ban anything. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm not saying girls should cover up. But I'm saying that for every action, there are reactions.
Yes.
And I don't think you can say to these, when there's girls in G-strings everywhere and in the cafe, I don't think you can call every man that looks at a naked girl's bottom, or every woman, to be dirty or ogling.
We're not calling them dirty. We're just saying don't tell me to put pants on.
Have you been there? It's hard not to look.
But also you can look, and then you can look away. Like, as I say, it's the same thing as the guys who say, oh, you can't pay a woman a compliment anymore, or I can't even. It's like women know the difference between being ogled by a guy who's literally being creepy and somebody who's just looking because they're looking.
You know what it is that we are again making young girls with their bottoms out, giving them the responsibility of men and their own sexuality. It is not a girl choosing a bikini bottom. It is not her responsibility to go, oh, I should really be considerate of Ian's sexuality.
But don't I should be considerate of that middle-aged man who might feel uncomfortable. He can feel uncomfortable. It's not my job.
What am I meant to do?
My teenage daughter's job to make a middle-aged man not feel uncomfortable.
No, I get all that. I guess what Ian is expressing in, like, admittedly a clumsy way, and he did lose me when he started to talk about.
Yeah, because it always leads to something.
Yeah, and he says, in their letter, he said, I attend numerous business networking meetings, often coming across ladies who are pointedly leading with their breasts, so to speak.
So we don't take women seriously when they have body
immediately
parts.
lost business credibility. I think what he's saying is that he's speaking for a generation of particularly men who are listening to what they're being told by women. Don't sexualize women. Women aren't sex objects. And then going, but I'm confused. I don't understand. If they're not sex objects, why are they dressing in a way that looks to me like they're trying to be sexy and get my attention?
Welcome to the world. It's confusing. Sometimes you have to question your prejudices and your assumed knowledge. Sometimes you have to change the way you think about things. And it's time for this chap to do that.
Mamamia out loud!
If you want to make Out Loud part of your routine 5 days a week, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers.
Kate Langbrook is hosting a season of No Filter. We've been working on this for a few months now. There's a bunch of other things that I'm working on, some other projects, and I wanted to find someone who could guest host a season. You bitches were busy.
Yep.
No, Kate was my first choice. So I went to Kate. Nothing against you both. But
Ow.
Kate, I think,
I
is
wanna
one
meet
of
Andy Lee.
Yeah, sorry. Kate is, I think, one of the most intuitive, instinctive, warm, engaging interviewers. And I just thought No Filter would be such a good forum for her. So Andy Lee, she's doing about 8 episodes. This is the first one. And what an interview.
I was listening to it on the way to work and I was late to our meeting because I was sitting in the car listening. I couldn't get out. And
I cried twice listening to it.
What I loved was that it was two mates, clearly with an enormous amount of respect for each other.
Because they know each other.
I felt like a fly on the wall to just how they would chat normally, and I loved it. Andy Lee is, of course, a podcaster. He's a TV host. He's a children's book author, and he's best known as one half of Hamish and Andy. And because they're mates, Kate asks questions the media wouldn't otherwise get away with. He probably wouldn't answer if it was someone he didn't, trust. And I'm conscious of pulling this part of the interview out because I totally respect Andy's point that you don't want the Daily Mail writing why Andy Lee hasn't had kids yet and sensationalising what was actually a really rational and nuanced conversation. So here's how that part of the chat went.
Because you're so family oriented, you know what I have to ask you.
What's that?
Whether you're inclined to have your own family.
Yeah. I mean, I'm asked this a lot.
Oh, well, I can imagine that you are because women also get asked. It's just a thing because in life there are certain transitions that happen.
Yeah.
They're not guaranteed. They're not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But because you are who you are, you're very family oriented. How do you feel about
I'd gone through – it was something I thought I would definitely want. Then I went through patches of I don't think I want this at all. And then I'm trying to work –
which is like pretty common.
Pretty common.
Way, yeah.
It's not the reason not to, but I think these are things that go through my mind, and all my friends and family when they've had their own kids, it's a really tough time.
It's hard,
and not tough as in it's not rewarding. It's just a lot.
Well, it should be. It has to be.
Yeah,
it's
all
the
consuming.
Sacrifice.
Yeah,
yes,
and it's beautiful, but it's all consuming.
And he makes a great point, which is that when you don't have kids, and he doesn't say it like this, but it's not like your free time, all that spare time is meaningless. Like he's using it in such a meaningful, family-oriented way. I think sometimes people think that if you don't have kids, you're not family-oriented.
That you're selfish. Yeah, because he spoke about how his mother became really, really ill when he was a teenager, still in school, and how his father's pretty much full-time carer for her, and he's a very involved uncle and
he has lots of really close friendships. And so if he were to have his own family, he's very cognizant of the fact that time is finite and it would cost you something. And there are a few things in that I want to pull apart. And the first is, Holly, do you think it's refreshing to have a man asked about kids in the way that Kate just asked him?
I do, because I think these are questions that women, high-profile women, are always asked. But I think that there's a problem, even between these two people who know each other really well, is that he has to be so careful of what his answer is to this question. There are parts of this interview, like the part, Mia, where he talks about that illness that his mum had, that are so honest. Like so astonishingly honest. He talks about his resentment as a teenager. He talks about how it affected the family. He talks about being angry with her. Things you don't often hear people saying. And yet when you ask this question, I felt like his answer was actually quite sort of safe. You know what I mean? Like, I love kids, but I love being available for other people. You know, maybe it'll happen one day. Because there isn't a right answer to this question, because the problem with asking it is you're probably not going to get the honest answer if there's a real story there. I don't mean this with famous people necessarily, Andy Lee. I mean anybody. If you meet someone at a party and or at a business thing and you're making small talk and they don't have kids and you say, oh, why? Which we've all learned not to ask.
I've learned that the hard way, yeah.
they're not going to say to you, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that this is the answer that Andy Lee would have given, of course, they're not going to say to you, we've been trying for 5 years. I've had 3 miscarriages.
Like Jennifer Aniston said, she was actually trying all through her 40s to become a mother.
They're not going to say that to you, or they're not going to say, actually, there's a genetic condition in my family that we're really wary of passing on, so it's a complicated decision for us. They're not going to say to you, we're actually being considered to be adoptive parents, but they're not going to say that, right? Unless you are incredibly close to them. And they're also probably not going to say, we just don't want to. Because even now in 2024, and maybe less for men than women, but I think it's changing, that is an answer that nobody is ready for. We still have it on the tick list of things that all well-rounded people should do. Procreate, have some children, and if you don't, there's something a bit wrong with you. We've talked about this on the show before. I think that for women in particular, we need to really unpick that because, there are more and more women who are not having children. It needs to be more and more normalized that children are something that you should 100% not have if you don't want to, because the ramifications for everybody involved are enormous. And yet we still go around treating it like it's something to just tick off your list, like going on holiday to Italy or something.
Yeah.
So although I loved his answer, I am also very aware of the fact that there's no right answer to this question that you can give in this instance.
Mia, what do you think? Because there's a lot of curiosity, and I'm just going to be, because I agree with everything you say, Holly, but listening to the interview, you're doing okay, so he's written children's books. He loves kids. He's got nieces and nephews, or he's got a nephew that he talks
Not every
about.
children's book author loves kids. I'm not saying he doesn't love kids.
No, but this is what my brain is doing. I'm just putting
that
it.
He was this bestseller.
I did, because at that book, my kids were young enough to have, and every child I know.
3 million books in 35 countries.
All over the world. So I know that. I know that he's an incredible uncle. You hear about that. A lot of his friends have kids. He's in a long-term relationship with a woman who is about 30, 31, I think. So you put all of those things together and the maths in your head goes, I wonder if he's thinking about kids. And it's not that you're going to judge the choice, but it definitely comes up. Do you think it's ever an appropriate question to ask?
Well, I'm the wrong person to ask because all I ask is inappropriate questions. Yeah. I was doing the maths. So I was going, okay, he's 42. His partner, Beck, is in her
31,
early 30s.
32, yeah.
And I think that what he's talking about is really common in men, which is an ambivalence. And, of course, some women, but a lot of men. And the reason that I think that a lot of men are ambivalent is because their window for having children is almost infinite. What will often be the catalyst for that decision is a woman. It's either her desire to have children because she really wants them, or it's her age and the window's going to close. Without wanting to compare Hamish, for example, Hamish's wife, Zoe Foster-Blake, is the same age as Hamish, give or take. I think she's a year or two older maybe. And so they had their kids, I think 10 years ago maybe they had their first child. When Zoe's window, it was a different calculation. So what's interesting when there's an age gap, and without wanting to pry into your situation, Jessie, I think that's a real factor, that his ambivalence is really, really normal. And it's not until something happens, he's got all the time in the world.
You say that, but something that I've heard a lot of men talk about is a desire for fatherhood, and maybe their wives or girlfriends or partners are at a different stage of their career, and they're saying, I feel an urgency because I want to be a certain age when I'm a dad. If I want to have 3 or 4 kids and I'm only getting started at X age, then I'll be blah when they start kindergarten. Like, I'm actually hearing that more and more from men. The age gap definitely changes things. And I did think, listening to it, the reason why he probably has to have some sort of answer prepared is because we don't know what the discussions are between the two people involved. And that's probably evolving and changing all of the time. And you don't want to betray that person. Often in couples, a conversation is half done. Like, you're not finished it. And then outsiders are asking and you're like, oh, actually we don't know, or whatever it is.
We used to do this all the time, Jason and I, when we'd be asked, do you want more kids? It was almost a shtick we did where I would be like, yes, and he would be like, yes, I think Mia should have kids with her next husband. Like, it would be a shtick, and it really belied a deep rift between us because I really wanted more kids and he really didn't. And it's hard because people do, that's just the stuff of small talk or, big talk, that kind of thing. All I can say is that catalyst will come. They've got a really long time because what you don't want to happen, what I've seen happen before, when the man isn't ready, they delay, and the woman misses her window. He might then go on and meet a younger partner and have children 5 years later or 2 years later or 10 years later, but her time is done. She's missed her window.
I get that, and I've seen it happen as well, of course, in my real life. But I also just think we have to normalize the idea that people can have really happy, fulfilling relationships that don't involve children. It's the same thing with, we've talked about this on the show before, that they are also constantly asked when they're getting married, him and his partner, Beck. Constantly asked when they're getting married, as if their relationship is not valid because they have not done that. And it's the same with the kids. Like, they are, from the outside and from everything he said in this, clearly an incredibly besotted, committed couple who, they've got homes together, they've got the whole life together that's rich and interesting and varied. But because they haven't ticked those two boxes, and then you want to add the word yet, maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's like we don't believe it's valid. And I just wish we could be a bit more open-minded about what families look like.
I feel so invested in both Andy Lee and Ryan Shelton becoming fathers. And I think that's because they seem like really great men. They seem like men who would be great fathers. And I just think the more good fathers there can be in the world, but I understand that fatherhood is not a community service, but I think the more, good fathers there are, the better for the boys and the girls that they raise. But anyway, apparently it's none of my business. Outlouders, you can listen to that episode. Highly recommend that you do. We'll put a link in the show notes. No filter.
Should Andy Lee have a baby?
Okay, we'll be putting a poll about whether Andy Lee should have a baby on our Instagram.
I've got a recommendation. I've been trying to fill a Fargo-shaped hole in my life. I ranted on one of our subscriber episodes about summer about how Fargo season 5 is the best thing I've seen on television forever. I'm trying to fill the Fargo-shaped hole in my life, and Brent and I have started watching True Detective, which is another one of these things that's a serialized show that has nothing to do with
the last season.
So Fargo, for example, it's not a through line. Every season of Fargo completely stands alone, and so does every season of True Detective. The first one was a big hit because it had Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson in it or something.
Didn't it have Gillian Anderson, a season of True Detective?
I think that was definitely a season. And they're generally about detectives.
Murders.
You'll be surprised to hear.
Grisly murders.
And grisly bad murders, right? This one is called True Detective Night Country, and it stars Jodie Foster, who is killing it at the moment.
She's having a moment, isn't she?
And an actress that I hadn't seen before, but who is amazing in this, who's the other detective called Carly Reese.
We've got 5 bodies frozen into a giant block of flesh. And no answers. We found this.
I've seen that before. Years ago.
You know the stuff that's happening in this town.
My job is to keep everyone safe.
Dead bodies, weird circumstances. You need to get the shit under control.
And the thing that's fascinating about this season, Grisly Murders, probably not for you, Mia, is its conceit. So it's set in Alaska during their polar night. And a polar night in Alaska lasts for 2 to 3 months. So on the first night of the polar night, there's the last sunset for 3 months.
I'm out.
Oh, I'm obsessed. That's so interesting.
She's in.
Oh, so good, right? So imagine, and this is a real place in the real, this is a fictional town.
Yeah.
In the real place, in the real world, it does not get light
there'd
again.
be some murders there.
And so can you imagine the mental health struggles, the issues that are involved in living somewhere like that? And large parts of the world are like that. The bits of Scandinavia that are like that too. Anyway, in this small Alaskan town called Ennis, there's an Arctic research station where lots of scientists study ice and stuff. I don't know what they're studying, something. On the last sunset of the year, they all vanish. Just vanish.
All of them.
Jodie Foster and the other, they go out there and there's it's just as if they walked out and were never seen again, right? That's the premise of the show. And Jodie Foster and Carly Reese then obviously examining what happens. It gets pretty gruesome pretty quickly.
But can I ask about the gruesome for those who have weak stomachs like I do? Is it like just one bit and you can fast forward it, or does it keep coming back to the gruesome?
No, it keeps coming back. There's really interesting interactions with, so the Alaskan Indigenous people. Carly Reese plays an Indigenous detective called Navarro. And so that's really interesting because that's a culture I'm not familiar with. They say that because of this polar nighttime, it's a place where the, sort of the space between the living and dead is very thin. It's so good. You would really like it, Jessie.
I love
if you can stand
and I would really hate it.
The gore. Anyway,
She loves a bit of gore. Are you kidding?
Is on Binge. And Fargo Season 5, which I will promise stop talking about now, is on SBS On Demand. Those are my recommendations for snow-related crime shows.
And I have a recommendation for something to listen to now that is nothing like that. It's neither grisly nor dark. If you've ever been curious about what it's like to be best friends with twins, we got a dilemma from a woman who is actually best friends with sisters. And it was a really interesting letter and an interesting dilemma. And so the person that we thought could give us quite a bit of insight into that is the best friend of Jessie and Claire Stevens. Her name is Andy, and she popped into the studio to give her view. I found it the most fascinating.
She was very wise.
Because
very wise.
Outlouders might not know this, that Jessie and Claire have the same best friend. And she was their bridesmaid at each of their weddings. They were bridesmaids at her wedding. Like, this is a very tight threesome. And we got Andy in and asked her everything we wanted to know in the service of our Outlouder who has this dilemma.
But mostly in the service of just being really nosy about what it's like being. And you guys have been best friends since you were like 13.
Yeah.
We'll put a link in the show notes. We'd love it if you'd subscribe if you're not already. And if you are a subscriber, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to us on Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. Assistant producer is Tahli Blackman. And there's been audio production by Leah Porges. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye. Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and want to support us as well, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There is a link in the episode description.